is a little bit behind Zoom. Now, officially, Facebook is going live. So I'm going to just share a moment over here. So welcome if you're on Facebook. As I was telling all those on Zoom a moment ago, I've got a really bad joke tonight. When I say bad, I just mean it's not very funny. But let me first share the video. Just give me a moment here. Share and share now, friends. Okay, shared once. And let me share it in the other place. Okay, give me a moment. And let's see. Give me a moment. I'll be with everybody. Facebook, I don't know. Every time I need to share a video, it just makes it more difficult and more difficult. Okay, 1, 2, 3, shared. Share now public. Okay, great. All right. So we're all shared out, and it's great to see you, of course, virtually tonight. Let's see. Okay. So if you're on Facebook, just let me know. Say hello. If you're on Zoom, you can also let me know. So welcome to our class on the holiday of Sukkot. As I mentioned, if you're on, by the way, if you're on Zoom, I have you muted. You may unmute yourself. However, just be aware it's recorded on Facebook, which is fine. Nobody can see you. But if you want to ask a question, just be aware about that, or you can ask a question in the chat. Okay, so my joke for today, which I said is not very funny, it's another Corona joke. So after hearing about the Aravot's symptoms of having no taste and no smell, the Lulav and Hadassim were placed in quarantine, and people now understood why the esrog was hiding in a box the whole time. Ha 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 ha. Anyways, it's just a timely joke. It's not very funny, it's just timely. So that's where we are with that. For those who don't know, and it's something we're going to get into later tonight, the 4 species that we use on Sukkot have different meanings to it, and as we'll learn, you know, the esrog has a good taste and a good smell, but the aravot, the willows, have no taste or smell. So what are we coming to discuss today? We are discussing the holiday of Sukkot, and the holiday of Sukkot comes 5 days after a very intense time. So just so you know, before I delve further into this topic of Sukkot, we're going to discuss today both laws, customs, and meaning of the holiday of Sukkot. So again, we'll be flipping between telling you practical, what you should be what needs to be done, and also meaning behind all these different actions. So we will be covering a lot of ground. And as I always tell people, you know, if you haven't celebrated Sukkot at all, you don't need to jump in and do everything. I'll let you know all the information, but you know, start with something small. So again, even if you're learning about something you're not ready to do yet, just understanding and appreciating the laws and the customs is important in and of itself. And hopefully you'll pick something that will be useful. For a practical note, if you don't have a sukkah in your house, I am offering this year the ability to come to your house. I'll have a sukkah out at your house, a sukkah mobile, a portable sukkah, and I'll be there for just a couple minutes. You can make a blessing of the lulav and a trog, and make a blessing over food. So you're welcome to come. You're welcome to reserve that on our website. So the holiday of Sukkot is interesting in that it comes right after the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is a very intense time, and particularly Yom Kippur is very intense with all the fasting and the lengthy prayers. This year, I don't know who led the services, but you know, the morning prayers went all the way till 3:45. So it's a very, very long day, very, very difficult day. And kind of, you know, as I remarked to my wife this year after the Yom Kippur, you know, it feels like after Yom Kippur, like everything just comes crashing down, you know, like it's a very intense day, high energy, high strung, high feeling. And then the moment Yom Kippur is over, it's like everything just comes crashing down. And all that inspiration runs the danger of disappearing, which in many cases it does. Well, in Judaism, and Kabbalistically, it explains that is one of the reasons why we have the holiday of Sukkot right after the holiday of Yom Kippur, just a couple days later. It enables us to bring down all the high intensity into a practical day-to-day life. Because although Yom Kippur is a lot of inspiration, a lot of intensity, a lot of connection to God, but it's not within our day-to-day life. And that's part of what Sukkot is bringing all of that, the feelings of Yom Kippur, and bringing it into our day-to-day life, bringing it in a practical way. And you see that actually in the mitzvah of Sukkah. The mitzvah of Sukkah is unique in that everything you do is a mitzvah. What do I mean? So usually a mitzvah is something specific. So if you shake the Lulav and etrog, that's a very specific mitzvah. If you put on tefillin, that's a very specific mitzvah. If you eat matzah, that's a very specific mitzvah. Using a style. And what's interesting by Sukkah is if you're in the Sukkah, whatever you do in the Sukkah is a mitzvah. You sleep in the Sukkah, you're doing a mitzvah. You eat in the Sukkah, you're doing a mitzvah. You read a book in the Sukkah, you're doing a mitzvah. Whatever you do in the Sukkah is a mitzvah, and so that brings the idea of bringing inspiration of the holiday of Yom Kippur into our day-to-day life, and it starts in Sukkot, and hopefully it continues throughout the year. In fact, there's a line we say at the end of Sukkot, we say, "V'Yaakov halach hadarko," that Jacob went on his journey. What that means is that after Sukkot is when we take the inspiration of the holiday season and bring it to the rest of the year. The way to ease into the year is through the holiday of Sukkot. And so by understanding the holiday of Sukkot, we'll find different ways in which we can bring this inspiration that we had throughout the high holiday season and bring it into our lives, because that's really what the purpose is. It's not just a time of forgiveness, as I've spoken about if you were in the synagogue on the holidays, but Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is also a time of connection to God, and we have to bring that connection throughout the rest of our year, and we will accomplish that through Sukkot. So with that being said, now that you have a general introduction, the general idea of Sukkot is to bring the inspiration of the high holidays into our year. Now we can get into the actual holiday. We'll discuss the actual holiday of Sukkot, and we'll discuss the actions that we do, the mitzvah that we do on the holiday of Sukkot, and how that has different messages for our entire year. So without further ado, let's do that. I'm just going to share a screen over here for a moment. Just need to, 1 second. Gotta play with my screen over here. Okay. So, share screen, and there we have it. All right, I'm not going to share my screen the whole time because in my mistaken belief, I believe that you want to see me more than you want to see the screen. I don't know if that's true, but let's pretend it's true in my mind. So first, before we get into it, the first thing we have to discuss is, of course, the days. So if we're going to celebrate a holiday, we have to do it on the correct day. We know American holidays, some of them default to the nearest useful day. So for example, Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday. But Jewish holidays, of course, fall when they fall out. And so this year we have the first day of Sukkot is on Friday the 2nd. So that's this Friday, the 2nd in the evening. It starts in the evening. I hope everybody got their calendar yet. They did ship. I don't know if people did yet, though. I haven't heard too many reports. We did ship out your calendars before Rosh Hashanah. So I hope your calendars come soon, because the calendars from last year are pretty much ending. Okay, by the way, if anybody does get their calendar, please let me know as soon as you get it, from us, that is. All right, so Friday is the first day of Sukkot. When we say Friday, we mean Friday evening. That is after sunset is the first day of Sukkot. As you know, Jewish days start at night. That is the most important time. And as far as holiday goes, so as I'm sure you know, there's within Jewish holidays, there are holidays that are, very more strict. What's called Yom Tov, for example. Oh, someone told me they got their calendar today. Great. Okay. So for example, like Yom Kippur, we don't drive, we don't do any work. Similarly, Rosh Hashanah, we're not supposed to do any work. If you're, religious Jews, we won't drive and those types of things. So what are the days of Yom Tov? What are the days of a serious holiday? Is Friday night, Shabbat, and Sunday. So the first 2 days of Sukkot in the diaspora. Of course, in Israel, will be 1 day. And then towards the end of Sukkot over here, the 9th at night is actually not really any more Sukkot. It's called Shmini Atzeret, which we'll get to in next week's class, and Simchat Torah. So the last day of Sukkot, and actually the last day you technically have to sit in the Sukkah, is on the 9th. Some people have a custom to still sit on the Sukkah on the 10th, because in the diaspora, many things we celebrate 2 days. By the way, that note, since I live in the diaspora, when it's my birthday, I accept presents both on the first day of my birthday and the next day too. Okay, now. So the first day of Sukkot is here, the 9th, it ends over here. There is holiday on the 10th and the 11th. Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah. We'll discuss that again next Wednesday. But for now, we're going to discuss Friday night, Shabbat, Sunday, all the way going through Friday. So Friday night is the first night of Sukkot. You're supposed to sit in the Sukkah. Shabbat is holiday, Sunday is holiday, and then we have the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th are all what are called intermediate days of Sukkot. So they're kind of holiday, kind of weekday. And so if you don't have to work, it's preferable not to work, but if there's something you need to work on, you can work on those days. And we keep all the laws of Sukkah and Lulav and Etrog during these days, as we will discuss moving forward. So let's now discuss what do we actually do on these days of Sukkot. Well, the first thing we do is we sit in a sukkah. Now, I'm going to describe to you what a sukkah is, but suffice to say it's a booth with the vegetation on top. Hopefully, everybody knows what a sukkah is. What is the reason we sit in a sukkah on the holiday of Sukkot? Well, one reason is it's to remind us of the miraculous cloud canopy in the desert. So after the Jewish people left Egypt, they were 40 years in the desert. And when they were in the desert, God gave them these protective clouds that protected them from the rain and the sun and from scorpions and snakes and whatnot. And so to remind us of that cloud, we celebrate the holiday of Sukkot. Now, what this tells us, by the way, something interesting, is that whereas all other Jewish holidays celebrate a specific date on the calendar. So, for example, Yom Kippur is the day the second tablets were given. Rosh Hashanah is the creation of mankind. Hanukkah is the day when the Maccabees won. Purim is the day when the Jewish people won the war against their enemies. Passover is the day we left Egypt. All Jewish holidays celebrate a single event. Sukkot is the only holiday which celebrates not a single day event. It celebrates that for 40 years we were surrounded by the clouds. And there's different reasons why we celebrate it this time of year, why not another time of year? And when you think about it, wouldn't it be more convenient to put it in a different time of year? Because this is right after the holiday. So this ties into what I said earlier, that Sukkot also enables us to draw down many of the feelings of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Sukkot helps us draw that down. Another reason why we celebrate this time of year is it says we don't want to celebrate in the Sukkah not when it's perfect weather. Why? Because if it's perfect weather, one might say you're sitting in the Sukkah because it's nice outside, right? Now, we don't really know about this in Florida, but up north, it starts to get cold. Israel also starts to get cold this time of year. It's not the perfect time for a Sukkah physically. And thank God we have good Sukkah weather this year, but some years it's too hot. So the idea is that we want to show we're sitting in the Sukkah purely because it's a mitzvah, not because we want to have this nice booth outside that we can sit in. So again, the simple reason is that we're celebrating the clouds of glory. What's interesting about the holiday of Sukkot is known as a very, very joyous time of year. Now, why is it known as a joyous time of year? It's actually called Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. If you know the holiday of Shavuot, actually, it only says Zman Simchatenu, the day of our rejoicing, once. About Sukkot, it says it twice. So why is it a rejoicing time? Well, one reason simply is we just finished Yom Kippur. Our sins are forgiven. At least that's what we assume. So it's a very joyous time. God forgives our sins. That's a time to be happy. Another reason behind it, and it's a theme that I've said many times this evening, and It's something that will come up repeatedly, and that is that the feelings of connection to God that we got on Yom Kippur now come out in a way of joy. So on Yom Kippur, we acquired it through being a little bit solemn, through being serious, but now all those feelings come out and burst out in a joyful way. And so that's why it's called a time of our joy, because feeling connected to God is joyful. Another reason for joy is, if you look at all the three festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, they're also connected to agriculture. In fact, in the Torah, they actually have names of agriculture. So, for example, the holiday of Pesach is the holiday of planting. The holiday of Shavuot is called Chag HaKatzir, the holiday of cutting. And the holiday of Sukkot is called Chag HaAsif, the holiday of gathering. So what does that mean? The way it would work is that on Pesach they would plant it. On Shavuot, on Pesach they would plant it, I think so. On Shavuot, they would cut the fruits. So it's kind of joyful, but then they need to wait for the fruits to ripen. So sometimes even after you cut something, you need to let it ripen. So they would cut the fruits, but they would leave them outside of the house to dry, to ripen, or whatever it is. And Sukkot is when they would bring it in. So Shavuot is a little bit happy because you're cutting it, but you can't eat it yet. And Sukkot is the happiest time, Chag HaAsif, the holiday of gathering. Now, what does this mean spiritually? Everything has to have a spiritual connotation. So we understand, obviously, Israel was very much into agriculture. A lot of Jewish rituals are surrounded with agriculture. God wanted us to work the land. But nevertheless, many of us are not farmers today. So what is the meaning of all of this nowadays? So the Rebbe explains that on Pesach, we don't have, so to speak, any joy, because although we had faith, we were not given any mitzvahs yet. So there's no joy yet. Then comes Shavuot, which is the holiday of giving of the Torah. We were given mitzvahs, but we hadn't yet practiced them. So it's like cutting the fruits, but not actually getting to bring them inside. And then Sukkot, after we've had the mitzvahs for a couple months and we've practiced the mitzvahs, now we can truly be joyful because we've actually been doing the mitzvahs for a while. So the holiday of Sukkot symbolizes this idea that not just we have the faith, not just we've got the mitzvahs from God, but we actually are doing them. And that comes in expression, as I mentioned earlier in the class, this idea that on Sukkot, everything we do in the Sukkah is a mitzvah that expresses this idea that we have the mitzvahs and we can actually do them. And so we're happy in the holiday of Sukkot, not only that we are given the mitzvahs, but we actually do them. And that brings us so much joy because mitzvahs connect us to God, which is a whole nother discussion I mentioned many times. Mitzvahs are not just nebach, a bunch of rules and restrictions, but they're joyful things that connect us to God. Okay, so we just discussed what are the days of Sukkot, and the first 2 days of Sukkot are holiday, which is Friday night, Shabbat, Sunday. We discussed there's intermediate days going all the way through the following Friday. We also discussed generally why this holiday starts after the high holiday season and brings all those ideas of the high holidays into this time of year. We discussed one of the things we do this time of year is we celebrate in a sukkah. We said the simple reason is to commemorate the clouds of glory that God protected us with. And we also discussed how Sukkot is a joyful time. We gave a couple of reasons. First of all, the one that we just discussed is celebrating the fact that we have the mitzvahs, but we also celebrate the fact that God forgives us. So now let's discuss, we will discuss later on the Lulav and Etrog. Let's discuss a little bit more of the Sukkah. There's an interesting thing the Medrash says. The Medrash says that for the first 14 days of New Year, Jewish people don't sin. Why don't we sin? Well, in the beginning, we're all scared of Rosh Hashanah, right? The first day. And then we're all even more scared for Yom Kippur, and we're preparing for Yom Kippur, so we're not going to sin. And then right after Yom Kippur, we're very, very busy preparing for the holiday of Sukkot. You have to build a sukkah and get your 4 kinds and put it together. It's a very, very busy time. So there's no time to sin. It says the first day of sinning is going to be actually the first day of Sukkot. It's very, very interesting. And so indeed, there's a lot of preparation that comes into preparing for Sukkot. So the main preparation is making the sukkah. So let me discuss a little bit about what has to be done to build a sukkah. Really, anybody can build a sukkah because today there are so many. First of all, you can buy pre-made sukkahs online. There's so many different options. You can also build your own materials. Really, if you get 2x4s and lattice, you can build sukkahs. It's just something that's a mitzvah that can be done. It just takes time. So the walls can be made from any materials that are durable. Today, many of the prefab sukkahs use canvas. There's a lot of debate today actually about the canvas because some say, well, the canvas moves in the wind. But regardless, you should have durable walls. Don't have a sukkah that's going to blow over in a light wind. Then the Sukkah, the roof of the sukkah has to be vegetation that has been cut from the ground, and it cannot have been used for any type of use yet. So for example, if you have bamboo mats that you've already used as a fence, you can't now put it on your sukkah because you've already been using it as a fence. The sukkah also has to be directly under the sky. Remember, we're relying on God's protection, just as God protected us with the clouds. We're showing we're relying on God's protection. So you have to be directly under the sky. In other words, don't put it under a screened-in cage or under a roof, or under a tree for that matter. It also says that the sechach, the covering, the foliage, has to make it more shade than sun. Also, it says, though, don't make it too thick so that rain won't get in it or that you won't see the stars. There's actually someone recently who made this sechach that pretty much keeps out all the rain. Basically, what they did is they took thick bamboos, then they cut them in half. So they're almost like gutter funnels. And then you put them on your sukkah roof and you put them at an angle and you put them all very close together. So the rain falls, and when it gets kind of like goes in a gutter and runs off. Very interesting idea. But they drilled a couple holes so that the rain will still get in your sukkah, so it's still kosher. Just an interesting invention somebody came up with. What's interesting is many people use, if you cut oak branches, the problem with those is the leaves dry out and they fall off. It's great we live here in Florida. And sorry, I've got the window open because there's nice weather and it's obviously somebody has a barbecue. The palm branches are really great because palm branches, they don't shrivel, they stay big and thick, and they provide a lot of protection. Also, many people buy from you could buy online today bamboo mats for your sukkah. Those are really great. And we don't really have many panda bears around here that are going to eat your bamboo, so you're okay with that. I mentioned it earlier that a sukkah should be totally open to the sky. That's why, just an interesting fact, if anybody here has ever been to Israel or any religious community, really, you'll see that when they build taller apartment buildings, it's very interesting. They build the balconies, when you go to Miami or any place here with have high-rise apartments, all the balconies are built uniform, one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, which makes sense. If you have one on top of the other, it's protected from the rain. But in Israel, they kind of stagger them. Let's say this is one balcony and the next balcony is like that, and the next balcony is like that. That way, each balcony has a little bit of space open to the sky so that everybody can have their own sukkah. Because if you're a religious shopper looking for an apartment, you want to know that on Sukkot, you don't have to find some public sukkah, that you can have a sukkah, you can just walk outside and eat. So that's why they build the balconies kind of staggered like this so that people can have a sukkah open to the sky. So another thing about the sukkah is the sukkah has to have at least 2.5 walls. By the way, with the walls, you can use the walls of your house too. If you come to the synagogue, you'll notice that many of the walls of our sukkah in the synagogue are actually walls of the building, of the shul building. For details, on how that works, especially if you have an overhanging roof, suffice it to say, if the overhang of the roof is within 4 cubits of the wall, then it still works. But if you have that, just call me and I'll guide you through it. But again, it's very possible you can build a sukkah very easily. So for example, over here, I have right outside my house, I have two walls like this. I could easily build a third wall and have a sukkah. The only problem being is that it's right under a tree. That's why I don't have my sukkah there. Many people have a custom, as I'm sure you know, your kids probably did in Hebrew school, is to beautify the sukkah, decorate the sukkah, nice pictures and paintings and stuff. The Chabad custom actually is not to beautify our sukkahs. That's just the Chabad custom. But many people do have a custom to cover their sukkahs. I see, just one second, I see some questions here on Facebook. Can you reuse wood or cover you used for the sukkah? If you mean wood that you mean Sukkah that you've used in previous years, yes, you can reuse year after year the wood for your sukkah if you used it last year, if that's what you mean. Okay, so that's about the sukkah itself. Those are details for the sukkah. We gave some of the meaning for the sukkah. That the sukkah shows in God's protection. It actually says that when you sit in the sukkah, you should feel how God is, so to speak, hugging you. The four walls of the sukkah and the schach, God is enveloping you with love and connection. That's why everything you do in the sukkah is a mitzvah, because you're enveloped totally by God. And so that's just a beautiful feeling that you can feel, so to speak, when you sit down in the sukkah. Try and feel God's hug and love for you. So that's all about the sukkah. So we've discussed the detailed laws of the sukkah, the walls that it has to have at minimum. By the way, that's minimum 2.5 walls. And by the way, the third wall only has to be 7/5 long. So really, the third wall doesn't really have to be that long at all. I remember when I was a kid, I was learning the laws of Sukkot. I had a book, and it talked about this guy called Ephraim Fresh Air. It was all about this guy who wanted a lot of fresh air in his sukkah, and so he came up with all these creative ways of making a kosher sukkah and getting a lot of fresh air into it. Can you use the sechach for something else after you take down the sukkah? So can you use the foliage from the sechach and use it for something else? After the holiday, yes, I believe you can. After the holiday, you can use what you used for the sechach for something else. That is okay. All right, the 4 species. Let's talk about the 4 species now. So the other main mitzvah of the holiday of Sukkot is what's known as the 4 species, what people quickly call the Lulav and Etrog. But actually, it is 4 species. Let me pull up here on the screen the verse in the Torah that tells us about the 4 species, so you have a better idea. 1 second here. Just pulling up. Okay, let's share the screen. By the way, here's just, if you want to get a bamboo mat, here's just one example. You can go to sukkahmart.com, but there's plenty of websites. Okay. Somebody asked, if you take your sechach and use it for something else, then you cannot use it for sechach again. Well, it depends what you use it for. So for example, if you take the sechach from your sukkah and put it on top of your patio as shade, you can use it again if you remove it. So for example, in the synagogue where we have the sechach sitting over the kids' playground, if we were to leave that sechach, that bamboo mat, up all year just for plain shade, that when it comes Sukkot, it says you have to move it again. Have in mind you're now going to use it for the mitzvah. However, if you take that bamboo mat and you turn it into a fence or for some other uses, then you might be correct that you cannot use it again for Sukkot. It just depends what use you use it for. Okay. By the way, here's an interesting mnemonic to remember. If you know in Hebrew, the word sukkah is samach, chaf, and hey. This hints to what makes a kosher sukkah. So the samach has 4 walls, the chaf has 3 walls, and the hey is 2.5 walls. So that shows you that the sukkah can either be 4 walls, 3 walls, or 2.5. Just an interesting thing. Okay. It doesn't give us the verse. Okay. Well, let me read you the verse. The verse says like this: and you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of a beautiful tree, a date palm, fronds, a branch of a braided tree, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before God your God for 7 days. I want to point out something very important from this verse, and it's an important law. So everybody today that celebrates Sukkot celebrates with these 4 kinds that you see here on the screen, which is a citron, myrtle branches, willow branches, and palm branch. What you wouldn't know, though, is that in the Torah, it's actually not so clear, all of these. So, for example, the etrog, the Torah says you shall take a beautiful fruit. It doesn't say clearly what beautiful fruit. So this is just one, I just like to point out that the oral tradition and what some people call rabbinic Judaism, it is the tradition that everybody else keeps. So, if you trust the rabbis on this, you should trust them on other things too. But that's just, I'll get off my pedestal over here, saying people should trust me. All right, I'm kidding. All right, don't trust me. Trust the ancient rabbis. Either way, what I really wanted to point out also, another interesting thing, people say the rabbis and the Talmud are always arguing, how can we trust what they say? It's interesting. In the Talmud, all the rabbis agreed that when the Torah says you shall take a fruit of a beautiful tree, they all agreed it's an esrog. They just had different reasons why it means an esrog. And why would that be? In other words, how could it be they all agree what fruit it is, but how the verse means the etrog, they didn't agree on? And the answer is that obviously the tradition from Moses was that when the Torah says a beautiful tree, it means an esrog. But the tradition didn't tell them exactly why it meant an esrog. And so therefore, it was up to each and every single one of them to figure out how the verse means an esrog. So there's a lot of different interesting explanations, which we're not going to get into. So back to my point. So the Torah says you should take a beautiful fruit. That is an etrog, a citron. So citron is not a lemon. You go to the store, you buy a lemon, it's not it. The citron is a very temperamental fruit. It's actually very difficult to grow. It only grows in warm climates. And actually, that's why when you get an etrog, a citron, you can't even go to a store and buy a citron. Many citrons that are sold today, they graft them with other trees like lemons to make the trees more viable, because citron trees are just difficult to deal with. That's why the people that certify them, they go to Italy or Israel, and they make sure that these are kosher esrogs. Then the Torah says date palm fronds. So the lulav, which is a date palm frond, has to come from a date palm. So, if you go in Florida, you see a lot of date trees, but they're not date palms. So we actually cannot use the lulav from there. That doesn't work. They need to come from a date palm frond. Actually, a lot of them historically used to come from Egypt. Today, there are many that are also grown in Israel, but a lot of them would come from Egypt. Then the Torah says you need to take a branch of a braided tree. That is referring to the myrtle. Again, the rabbis all agreed this is what it is. Different explanations why, but if you see, it's kind of braided. Each area has 3 leaves growing out of it. And then finally, it says the willows of a brook. So these are willows from a brook, meaning it grows near the water. So these are the 4 kinds. So again, the Torah says, and when I read the verse, I'm going to point to the different items. Take for yourself on the first day, so it means it told us which day, which is Sukkot, the fruit of a beautiful tree, that's the etrog, date palm fronds, that's the lulav, a branch of a braided tree, that's the hadas, and the willows of a brook, that is the aravot. And then it continues, and you shall rejoice before God your God for 7 days. So we understand from the Torah that we need to take 4 items. There are a couple laws about these 4 items that the rabbis tell us. For example, the etrog, it has to be how it is naturally, how it grows. So many people are familiar with what's called a pitom. The thing that grows up on the top of the esrog. In this picture, you don't see it. So naturally, when they grow, some esrogs, as they're growing, the pitom falls off as they're growing on the tree, and that's okay. In other words, if your etrog is the same from when you cut it off the tree, then it's kosher. So for example, if you cut off the etrog from the tree and it has the pitom, the little pit on top, and then that comes off while it's off the tree, then it's no kosher anymore, because it's not anymore the weight was on the tree. But if it fell off while it's on the tree, it's kosher. So many people get their lulav and their etrog and they complain to me, Rabbi, it doesn't have a pitom. It's 100% kosher. Etrog, the citron, is the butt of many jokes. That is because if anybody has actually watched the video Spizin, if you have, you can put in the comments. I'm sure many people watch the Spizin. Many people know that the esrog is the one that people spend the most money on, and they look for the most beautiful. There's all these pictures of people in Israel looking at the esrog with magnifying glasses. People are very careful to get a beautiful etrog. Why? Well, simply put, the Torah says, you shall take for yourself a beautiful fruit. So not only does that mean that describes to us what the fruit is, but even within the fruit, one should take a beautiful one. So in general, it says when we do a mitzvah, we should get the nicest, right? Many people here buy cars. If you have the money, try not to buy a basic car. You get something with a couple features, something that's a little bit nicer, right? When you buy a house, you want to buy features if you can. When you get a present for someone, you get something nice, right? You don't get the basic. You buy your wife jewelry. You don't buy her plastic earrings. You buy her silver or gold. Well, similarly, it says when it comes to God, Zeh Keli Van Vehu. Two people said I love that movie. It says if you love God, then when you're doing something for him, you get something beautiful. If you have the means to, you don't buy a basic mezuzah, you buy a little bit nicer. You don't buy a basic tone, you get a little bit nicer. You don't buy a basic towel, you get a little bit nicer, right? If we get the iPhone 10, or what are they up to, whatever, iPhone 14, whatever they're up to now, then why shouldn't we get an upgraded esrog? Why shouldn't we get upgraded this, upgraded that? So that's in general with mitzvahs. If we have the ability and the possibility, we should do things in a nicer way for God. And that is doubly so when it comes to the esrog, because this is the only mitzvah where the Torah says clearly, take for yourself a beautiful fruit. And so that is why even people who generally can't afford to make their mitzvahs very nice, when it comes to the esrog, they try and get the nicer one. So that's why every year when I offer the lulav and etrog, I offer the basic, if that's all you're ready to spend money on. But you can upgrade and get nicer and nicer. Now, one has to be careful when you're getting nicer, though. Be careful that you're doing it for God, not just because you want to show off. There's a meme, a joke going around saying, a guy's calling the Israeli ministry, and he wants to know if people are going to be allowed in the synagogue on Sukkot. Why? He wants to know, do I have to buy a beautiful esrog or not? If nobody else is going to be in the synagogue, nobody's going to see my esrog, I can get a basic esrog. It's obviously a joke, but unfortunately, that's sometimes a reality where sometimes we get something nice, but it's not so much because we actually want to beautify God, but because we want to show off to other people how much we're respecting God. So I'm not saying you shouldn't get something nice, even if you have those feelings. You should get something nice, but try and make it a pure motive. Do as much as possible. Of course, as human beings, we always have mixed emotions, but try and do it for God. One other joke they say about esrogs, they say it takes a Orthodox, well, it probably depends on which Orthodox Jew you are, but they say it takes an Orthodox Jew 3 days to pick his estrog and 3 hours to pick his wife. It's just a joke. Obviously, it's not true, but the joke is, in some ultra-Orthodox, if you watch Stissel or whatever the other ones out there, Surugim, the videos you'll see out there, the dating scene, the Orthodox, in some groups, the dating is very short. So they spend so many hours inspecting their esrog, but when actually the person they're marrying, they don't spend too much time. Anyway, such is life. I'm not demeaning anybody. I'm just telling you the jokes that are out there. So that's the esrog. That's why people spend so much time getting a beautiful esrog, because the Torah clearly says that it should be nice. All right, let's talk about the lulav for a moment. The lulav, just the laws for the lulav. It shouldn't be dried out totally. The most important part is the middle branch of the lulav, and a better lulav is when the branches are tighter. As the lulavs can kind of sway more, it should be a little bit tighter. And be careful of the top. The top is what can make your lulav not kosher. If you smash the top, then the middle branch gets cut, and that's a problem. So be careful that the lulav is you keep the tip very safe. So when you put it down, make sure it's not hitting a wall or something. It's also, if I come to you and I shake lulav and esrog with you, make sure you don't, when you're shaking the lulav, don't hit the ceiling. The willow and the myrtle branches, the important laws over here is that they both should retain 50% of their leaves. And you have to watch out. If you have a lulav and etrog, if you don't take care of it, that means if you leave it out in the sun, you leave it out in your car, the branch, they will fall off eventually. So if you lose 50% of your leaves, usually the willow loses it, not the myrtle. Let me know and I'll have replacements. So that's also why I make the lulav and etrog as close as possible to Sukkot, because I don't want it to dry out. Many people put like a paper towel at the bottom of their lulav and etrog to keep it nice and fresh. Some people wrap the whole thing in silver foil. There's all different ways of doing it. It's also why we give a plastic bag. Hopefully it stays well. How you actually do these things. So the willows and the myrtles are all bound to the lulav. So that's one package bound with rings made of the lulav itself. And the etrog, so you hold the lulav in one hand, the etrog in one hand. And as we'll get to later, you'll make 2 blessings on the first time you shake it, 1 blessing the next time you shake it, and you hold it and shake it in 6 directions. Again, we'll get to that soon. Now, let's get to a little bit practical. Let me stop share over here for a moment so you can see me, because as I said earlier, I have this feeling that you want to see me, although I don't think it's true, but it sounds good. Okay, so the first night of Sukkot, which is October 2nd, Friday night, one lights the candles, and also you should light a 24-hour candle. Why do you light a 24-hour candle? We light a 24-hour candle because on holidays, we are not allowed to light new fires, but you can light from a pre-existing flame. So since after Shabbat, you're going to need to light another candle for the second day of the holiday, you should have a 24-hour candle. Make sure you get a really good 24-hour candle that will actually last more than 24 hours. So what's interesting is the first night of Sukkot, since you're going to be eating in the Sukkah, you're actually supposed to see the candles from where you eat. So you can either light the candles in your Sukkah or light it on a stand, or in my house, I have a little outdoor area I can light it in and still see the candles, but it's preferable to have those candles in or near the Sukkah. If you're going to be praying at home this year, the first night of Sukkot, there are prayers since it's a Friday night. Since it's a Friday night, we pray some of the prayers of the holiday of Sukkot. By the way, I learned something new. I'm going to show this to you. That you can actually get the Chabad Siddur, the Hebrew English Chabad Siddur online. So how do you do that? You go to HebrewBooks.org/16091. Again, HebrewBooks.org/16091. Click enter. I wrote Hebrew book. I need to write Hebrew books. That didn't work. So HebrewBooks.org/16091, and this will take you to the Chabad Siddur online. You can choose to download it or read it online. This has both the Hebrew and the English. Of course, it's not super high quality because they want you to actually buy the book. But so, for example, the first night would be in the prayer book on page 156. Let's take a look. It should almost be at the right place. Okay, that's page 71. Okay, because sometimes it's deleting in pages. We'll find it. Let's try to somebody I'm sure here knows the math what page I should be on. But what am I? 283. So on Friday night, you start from what's called Mizmor LeDavid. 317. Sorry, I should have done this before. Okay, 156. All right, we'll be there in a moment. So again, the evening prayer. Oh, I know why it's so off, because it has Hebrew and English, so each page is doubled. Again, you can buy the Siddur online. It has everything. So for example, a typical Friday night will actually start over here by the Lechune Ranana. But on this Friday night, we skip some of the preceding prayers. The reason is, well, there's multiple reasons. But one reason is that on a regular Friday night, they would make long services so people could make it in time for the service. You know, people were working, they could come late. Imagine that. They made the synagogue service in a way that people could come late. But on Friday, on a holiday, they assumed people weren't working once it would near the holiday. Anyway, so you would start over here, Mizmor LeDavid. This is Psalm 29. So you'd sing the typical Friday night. However, when you get to the Amidah, that is the main prayer, you would go to the festival Amidah. If you'd be using that prayer book, it would be page 331, the festival Amidah. Okay, and then when it comes nighttime of Sukkot, you eat in the Sukkah, of course. The first night of Sukkot is the most important night to eat in the Sukkah. So usually, if you're in a Sukkah and it's raining or it's very, very uncomfortable, it's terrible mosquitoes or whatnot, technically you're allowed to leave the Sukkah. However, on the first night of Sukkot, you have to at least make Kiddush and eat a sizable amount of challah in the Sukkah because the main mitzvah is the first night. So Friday night, if you have a Sukkah, make sure, even if it's raining, which it shouldn't be, you eat in the Sukkah on the first night. Just as an aside, Chabad always eats in the Sukkah, whether it's raining, whether it's pouring, whether it's freezing, we'll always eat in the Sukkah. But that's just the Chabad custom. I remember a book I read when I was a kid. You know, some people have a custom to sleep in the Sukkah, and there was a great rabbi who said first he wasn't going to sleep in the Sukkah because it was too cold in the Sukkah. But then he started going to the Sukkah to sleep in there. And so one of his students asked him, Rabbi, why are you sleeping in the Sukkah? He said, well, I don't have the mitzvah of sleeping in the Sukkah because it's too cold. But my guest is sleeping in the Sukkah. And so I have the mitzvah to honor my guest. So I'm going to keep him company. I'm going to sleep in the Sukkah. So it's an interesting thing. Sukkot is one of the few mitzvahs where you don't have to do it if you're uncomfortable. Just an interesting thing. I've given a speech about it in other years. And I won't digress now. All right. Whenever you sit in the Sukkah and you are either going to drink wine or eat something that is either mezonot, meaning made out of 5 grains, or bread, like cookies, cakes, challah, then you make a blessing of Leishev Basukkah, who commanded us, Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu, who sanctified us with the commandments that commanded us to sit in the Sukkah. You'll make that blessing. You will also, on the first time you sit in the Sukkah, make a blessing of Shehachianu. Now this applies whether you're eating your own Sukkah or someone else's Sukkah. You will make these 2 blessings. A couple other meanings to the Sukkah. So earlier we said the Sukkah is the idea that God is hugging us. It's a commemoration of the clouds of glory. Just another interesting reason of the Sukkot holiday is that it says this is a time of year when the nights start to get longer, when it starts to get colder, when it starts to get darker. And this symbolizes bringing our Judaism to the darkness of the world. So there's, so to speak, there's spiritual darkness coming to the world. And we lighten it up by bringing our mitzvahs out to the street. Judaism in general, our idea is we want to bring Judaism to the world. We want to bring what's called Or LaGoyim. We want to be a light to the nations. So we want to bring the light of our Judaism out. We need to, we start that with the holiday of Sukkot by bringing the Sukkah out onto the street. Of course, on Sukkot, there is a Kiddush to be said. If you have a sitter, you can read it in there. If you don't have a sitter, you can contact me. I can help you with in general, by the way, if you don't have a prayer book at home, we can lend you prayer books. Of course, with the synagogue social distance service, we don't have as many people as usual. I can lend you a prayer book. Although, of course, it's amazing to buy one yourself. You can probably buy it online. Let's see, Tehilat Hashem English. You get not PDF, but this is the This is the siddur that we use at the synagogue. It's great. You can get it here on Amazon for $38.99, or you can get 6 new for $29.99 plus $3.99 shipping. So it's a great siddur to have. The siddur Tiyal Hashem with the annotated English translation. Of course, the art scroll is also a great one. We just use mostly the Chabad in the synagogue, so that's the one that I'm very familiar with. But you can also use art scroll. Okay, I see I didn't share my screen when I pulled that up over here. Okay, whatever. All right, another interesting thing that we have on Sukkot, which we don't have any other holiday, is, as we mentioned earlier, the movie called Ushpizin, which means guests. In the movie, it's a parody on this idea of guests. In the movie, of course, 2 convicts come to his sukkah. But in the real story, Ushpizin, we are told that holy guests come to our sukkah on the nights of Sukkot. And they are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and King David. They come each day of Sukkot. All 7 of them actually come each day, but on different nights, some of them are more present than others. Couple reasons given for why they visit us. One reason is given is that since the sukkah is to bring holiness to the outdoor, to the darkness, these ushpizin, these holy guests, fortify us with the strength required to do it. In many Jews have a custom to say different prayers about the ushpizin, about the guests. In Chabad, we don't necessarily have any prayers regarding it, but we talk about the different guests on each night and what they bring to the table. No pun intended. Another theme that we have on Sukkot, very fascinating, is something called Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the joy of the drawing. So when the sacrifices were brought in the temple, there usually was what's called a libation of wine. So along with the sacrifice, they would pour wine on the altar. There were 2 holes in the altar, and they would pour the wine that would go down. On Sukkot, they would pour not just wine, but they would pour water. And actually, when they would draw the water, there was a big celebration in Jerusalem. So the whole night, it says people would be up celebrating, and in the morning, they would draw the water with much rejoicing. And so, as you know already, I mentioned earlier that this holiday is called the holiday of joy. That's why actually on Monday night, we're doing a Zoom celebration also to bring joy. But what is so joyous about the water? Why do we make such a big deal about the water? If anything, you would think the opposite. You would think wine is more joyous. Why is drawing water a joyous thing? And the answer is that water has an interesting characteristic to it, and that on one hand, it has no flavor, but at the same time, it is the source of life. Without water, nothing else can be around, nothing can survive. So similarly, serving God can be highly enjoyable, can be a very spiritually satisfying endeavor. But that's like wine, but it's limited. It's limited to our personal enjoyment. But God himself is infinite. And as we explained, and since God is infinite, when you do mitzvot, not just for your personal meaning and your personal ideas and your personal good feelings about it, but you're doing it totally for God, then your joy can be boundless, can be infinite. And so if you recall earlier, I said all the things that happen in Yom Kippur, we bring that on Sukkot. So on Yom Kippur, we have that infinite and deepest bond and connection with God, and that expresses itself on Sukkot, in which we are joyous just over our connection with God, and that expresses itself in water. It has no taste, but we're very joyous in it. And just as water, although it has no taste, it is the essence of everything. So to God, although we can't, the bond cannot necessarily always be expressed in understanding ways, but we feel it and we can rejoice about it. And it actually is a boundless joy, which is the joy of Sukkot. So when we are joyous on Sukkot, think of that you are rejoicing over your inner, infinite, deep connection with God. And that's what I said earlier, is that everything that happens in Yom Kippur, we express it over Sukkot. And so, when you express it in a solemn way, it's difficult to bring into your day-to-day life. But when you express it in a joyous way over 7 days, surely you can bring it out to the rest of your year, being happy about that bond that you have with God. Okay, I'm going to get back to a little bit about the Lulav and Etrog. Lulav and Etrog are not to be shaken on that we do not shake the lulav and etrog on Shabbat. So the first day we're going to shake lulav and etrog is on Sunday. If you order the lulav and etrog, you can either pick it up before Yom Tov, or you can come when you come on Sunday for the services. You can shake it then. Either way, when we shake a lulav and etrog the first time, we're going to make a couple blessings. We're going to make a blessing called Al Natilat Lulav. We're going to make a blessing who commanded us to take the lulav. Now, why the lulav and not the other four? There's 4 species you're shaking. Well, the lulav is the most prominent. That's one simple reason. It's best if you shake the lulav and etrog in the sukkah. It says that whatever the sukkah expresses, you draw it down and pull it close to your heart by shaking in the sukkah. Another blessing we say the first time we shake lulav and etrog is the Shehechiyanu blessing. So basically, after you're done making the blessings, you shake it in the 6 directions. The Chabad custom is actually you shake it 3 times in each direction. So you shake it 3 times to the right and bring it back to your heart, 3 times to the left, 3 times forward, 3 times up, 3 times down, and then 3 times backwards. The simple reason for the shaking is that, as we mentioned, all the holidays are connected with agriculture. And so, so to speak, we want to bless the different winds that come from the different directions, that it should be good for our crops. But on a what's the deeper meaning behind the whole lulav and etrog? Well, one deeper meaning is that generally having the lulav and etrog shows that we're victorious. It says that, after an army finishes, they walk with their weapons standing straight, their swords upright, showing they won the war. And similarly, when we finish Yom Kippur and we are sure that God has forgiven us, we stand tall and proud with our lulav in our hands. Also, the 4 species teach us to serve God with our complete being. So, for example, the lulav represents the spine. The myrtle represents the eyes. The leaves kind of look like eyes. The willows represent our lips. They look kind of like lips. And the etrog represents our heart. And so the lulav and etrog all represents that we have to serve God with all of our being. Another element of lulav and etrog is Jewish unity. This one you've probably heard many times, that the etrog has a good taste and a good smell, right? That represents people who do both Torah and mitzvot. Then we have the myrtle and dates. One of them smells good but doesn't taste good. One of them tastes good but doesn't smell good. That represents people who either do one or the other, just Torah or just mitzvot, but not both. And then you have the willow, which doesn't have a good smell or a good taste. That represents people who don't do anything. But we bind all of these together in the holiday of Sukkot, and we have unity. And again, this connects with what I said earlier, that the holiday of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that Sukkot brings everything down for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So where does true unity come from? To the point where you can unify even with someone who has no good deeds and doesn't study. Well, true unity comes from tapping into your soul, because at our soul, we're all the same. And so since on Yom Kippur, we felt our soul, so we don't feel differences between me and you. What differentiates between me and you, what brings hatred between other people, is our bodies, our external being. But at our soul, their hatred doesn't exist. And so since on Yom Kippur, we felt our soul keenly, now on Sukkot, we can celebrate unity. All right. Since we're running out of time, let me just run through the last couple things at the end. A couple other things we do on the holiday Sukkot. Every day of Sukkot, we sing the Hallel during the prayers. Those are the prayers, the songs of praise, mostly written by King David. If you have lulav and etrog during the prayers of the Hallel, you shake the lulav and etrog at different times. There's also a custom called Hoshainas. That is, when you take the lulav and etrog, during the services at a certain point in time, we circle around the bima in the synagogue. In temple times, they would actually circle the altar with the lulav and etrog. Nowadays, we commemorate it by circling with the lulav and etrog. I remember as a kid that the prayers on Sukkot were the most complicated. You can follow along in the prayer book, but they're the most complicated between the Hallel prayers and then this Hosanna prayer, and then the Musaf prayer is also very complicated. I just remember as a kid it was always very complicated, but if you follow directions, you'll figure it all out. Otherwise, do what you can. Anything else I want to mention? Yes, important. Although we know we've finished the days of awe, days of judgment, it actually says the final day of judgment is the final day of Sukkot, which is a week from Friday. It's called Hoshana Rabbah, the Great Hoshana. It's actually the day, it says, in which water is judged. As I'm sure you recall, we said this holiday we celebrate the water, we pour water libations on the altar. So the final day of judgment is actually on Hoshana Rabbah. That's why this seventh day of Sukkot, there's actually a lot of extra prayers. We also, it's the final day where we say the Psalm of the David Hashem Ori. We say that Psalm, we've started saying in the beginning of Elul, it's the last day, we say it's the last day of judgment. And there's other customs. Many people have a custom to stay up the entire night. So for example, on Thursday night, many people stay up the whole night. There's also another custom, which is to take, one other thing, there's a lot of prayers. One should, if possible, read the Hoshana prayers on Hoshana Rabbah. Many people take 5 willow branches bound together and bang them on the floor. It's called sweetening the judgments. And you bang it on the floor 5 times. Why do we take willows and bang them on the floor? So the Rebbe explains something very interesting. This is a custom from the prophets, but it's a very ancient custom. If you want those willows, send me an email because I'm going to be ordering them soon. But the level of nullification of the Arava is greater than any other. In other words, the level of feeling of nullified to God is great because there's no, so to speak, inherent value to the willow branch. It doesn't have a good taste, it doesn't have a good smell. And the day of Hoshana Rabbah, the final day of judgment, is also a day of extreme bond and connection with God, and therefore we take the willow branches and we bang it on that day. More advanced, there are 5 mystical dimensions of divine stricture, and there are 5 mystical dimensions of kindness. And so when we strike these 5, we strike it on the floor 5 times, we activate the 5 dimensions of kindness to sweeten the judgment. More Kabbalistically, we know our bodies are very Kabbalistic. In other words, we're built similar to the supernal Sefirot, how the supernal workings work. So that's actually why you have 5 fingers in each hand. The right side is your side of kindness. The left side is your side of severity. So these are the 5 kindness, 5 severity. That's why in general Judaism, you should always put the right over the left. That means you want kindness to overcome severity. When you pray, you should go like this. Also, another interesting Jewish custom, it says never to totally intertwine your hands. If you ever looked at Rabbi, it was very interesting. When he would put his hands like this, he would sometimes go like this. So they're not fully intertwined. You don't want to fully mix the kindness and the severity for some reason. So I a lot of times go like this. I don't know if you notice, you can see on the camera. So it's not fully intertwined. Other interesting things, the right and the left. Chabad wear careful jackets, all button right over left. The Rebbe actually has shirts with button right over left. I think Arrow Shirts brand used to do that. Either way. Next week, we'll be gathering on Wednesday evening again to talk about the other holidays at the end of the holiday, the last Friday, Shabbat Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, which is the end of the holiday season. But suffice it to say that hopefully you get the idea that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is a very intense time. But when it's over, one can feel like, now what? It's all over. You're like, calm down. The moment you eat that bagel, all the feelings of Yom Kippur can kind of dissipate. And so we have this holiday where we bring it down into day-to-day life. It's hard to bring the feelings of Yom Kippur into day-to-day life because it's so intense. And it's almost disconnected from reality. It's a day when you don't eat. It's a day when you pray a whole day. It's not a regular day. How do you translate that to living a regular life? And yet bringing spirituality. And that's what Sukkot is about, where you're living a regular life in your Sukkah, or you have the Lulav and Etrog, unity, love, connection to God, joy. We're trying to bring all of those feelings of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to bring it into our day-to-day lives so that we can carry it out to the rest of the year, because really this sets the tone for our year. And so as we begin the Jewish year, and as you celebrate Sukkot and you feel God's embrace as you sit in the Sukkah, as you feel God's embrace as you celebrate the holiday, try to think of ways that you can actually bring the inspiration of your Yom Tov, of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, into the year, so that when it comes next year, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you can actually come to God and say, well, I actually was a different person this year. Because that's ultimately the point of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. God doesn't just want to forgive us. He wants us to change. He wants to be different people. And that's the challenge of Sukkot. So it's not a minor holiday. It's not like the high holidays are over. It's actually just getting started. Whatever we spoke about in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, whatever we discussed in the sermons and the speeches and the classes and the feeling, now's the time to start bringing it down. Now's the time to start making it a part of your life, because life is about growth. God wants us always to grow and get better and better every single year. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur should never be boring. It shouldn't be, oh, we're doing this again, because every year you're going higher and higher. Every Sukkot you're going higher and higher. And so that's my wish to everybody here on Facebook and Zoom. This year, your holiday should be a wonderful holiday, be a holiday of great meaning and joy. And you should truly be able to feel the hug of God, the closeness to God this year. And may we all soon feel very, very close to God with the coming of the Mashiach speedily in our days. And very, very happy Sukkot to you. Look out for all our programs we're doing on the holiday of Sukkot. And we hope to see you all very soon again. So I'm going to stop.